Larry, you are now chairman of the board of Tokyo Electron, but only for a few weeks because you're about to make a change. Talk to me a little bit in terms of what you're currently doing.
Yeah, Tommy, I'm finishing up a 35-year career in the semiconductor industry with a company that provides equipment to make semiconductors. But in parallel, I've been active in an organization that engages in homelessness. And that period of time has been about 15 years. And I'm chairman of the board of Mobile Loaves and Fishes, which over the 25 years it's operated in Austin, Texas, we've fed about 6.5 million meals to the Austin homeless community and established a unique village, which we call Community First, where we're currently housing about 400 formerly chronically homeless individuals on our path strategically to take care of about 2,000. I don't view this as retirement. I view it as a pivot. And I believe God's called me to help hire and house veterans. So in this new season, I hope to facilitate the hiring of about 20,000 veterans into the semiconductor industry, and then work collaboratively with a lot of different agencies to help house veterans, but also house non-veterans, broad base, work on the movement.
And your passion with veterans all started because you were in the military.
Yes. Grew up in a military family. My father, interesting enough, my father served as a Marine in World War II in the Pacific, fighting against the Japanese. And I've worked for a Japanese company for the last 24 years. I took my father when he was 85 years old back to Okinawa and Tokyo on a very healing trip there. So it kind of started with service, a service to the military, but also public service. My father was a firefighter. My brother was a firefighter, had another brother in Vietnam, but there were never career level military service. And so that was part patriotic service, nursing, and a variety of different professions. But working class, grew up in northern Minnesota, and I realized I had to find a way to fund my education. And I fortunately received a hockey scholarship to play hockey at West Point, which then required military service afterwards. So I served 5 years active after that education, which was an amazing experience, and then served 5 years in the reserves.
Got it. And then how did you get started at Tokyo Electron then?
So as I transitioned out of the military, there's certain recruiters that, like to hire that demographic profile. And I went through a recruiter, and in over 2 days, I had 17 interviews, 45-minute interviews, and ended up landing a job in the semiconductor industry. And that was in commodity gas and chemicals. Did that for about 7 years, but I realized that commodity, you're fighting over pennies with 4 competitors. And I'd see these equipment, leaders dealing with long-term strategic plans, partnerships. You and I had lunch with Pat Gelsinger today, and I worked very closely with him as a customer, and that's what I was looking for in my career. So after 7 years in that commodity business, I was given the opportunity to pivot into the equipment, and then eventually was invited to join Tokyo Electron 24 years ago.
Pete, as you look back upon, Larry, as you look back upon your career as well too, what are some defining moments of your life, whether it's in the military or your time at the Tokyo? What are some key decisions that you had to make which changed the direction of your life, good or bad, as you look back and reflect?
It's interesting. I tell some of these stories, and one of them goes back to Jesse Copeland, first sergeant when I was first a lieutenant in the military. And when you come into a new unit after you've had your training, you're an officer, but you're inexperienced and new. And they pair you up with a seasoned sergeant that's probably been in 15, 20 years.
Got it.
And one of the things they love to do to new officers is give them the challenge. This is a long time ago, almost 40 years ago, and we didn't have GPS. So it was kind of like, hey, we're going to give him the opportunity to get lost and truly humiliate the person. Okay. And so I knew that was going to happen. And Captain Corda was my commander, came into the unit, and went out on our first field problem. And I was prepared. I was ready. I did a recon. I did a map, and then went eventually to the order. And Captain Corda threw me a curveball, and he says, well, we're not going to do that operation right now. We're going to do it after dark.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And all of my preparation, I think my heart started to race, and because I really wanted to establish a good first impression with my
Yeah.
team. So I went back to my Jeep, and I'm on top of it with my map, and First Sergeant Jesse Copeland came up. And there's a key important thing as young people or as leaders.
Yeah.
Occasionally we're asked a question where we have to be willing to cast aside our pride and
Yeah.
be willing to listen to experience.
Correct.
Jesse Copeland asked me, he goes, "Hey, LT,
Yeah.
do you want some help?"
Yeah.
And I had a choice.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, top sergeant. Yeah, top, I'd love some help right now."
Yeah.
But it was just he and I.
Got
He didn't
it.
try to humiliate me in
Yeah.
front of the larger group, which was kind of the mission of this road march. So he goes, "Hey, LT, let's see where we are." And he says, your gun tube, if you hold on to your triggers, there's a stabilizer, and you put that on your compass, on your azimuth, and you just tell your driver, follow the gun tube. And then your driver in the odometer is in kilometers. And every square on your map is a kilometer.
Ah.
So he says, have your gunner hold the stabilizers, set your azimuth, have your driver tell you every time you pass another kilometer, and you will get there with no problem.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sure enough, that night, I defied all the odds of a new lieutenant, and we got there. But I was willing to ask for some help.
Yeah.
Later on, I got in trouble for not checking my tanks at a range because I was running the range, and I didn't make the final check for the weapons.
Mm.
And that's a cardinal sin to
Yeah.
go back to the motor pool with ammunition. And I was going to be in trouble. Could have changed my career. But Jesse Copeland went to the colonel and said, "Don't destroy this young man's career for one mistake.
Yeah.
He has great potential."
Got it.
So-
Got it.
Relationships, humility, asking for some help. You and I may not be talking here if I
Yeah.
had made a different decision there.
Yeah. And it also showed you, this Jesse Copeland, how as a leader, how he came alongside with you. And that probably changed. It was a good example for you as a leader, how you invest in other people when they mess up or they don't follow through.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And he had pride in training and educating his officers so they could be the best leaders possible.
Yeah.
Isn't that an interesting
yeah,
perspective?
Yeah.
So how do we partner with these mentees and next generation to enable them to optimize and be very effective leaders?
Yeah. And for you, a lot of times, how did you learn that? Is it through conversations that you have with them? Is it coming alongside with them? Is it allowing them to fail? What's been your secret as you've worked with all these different types of leaders in the last?
Well, as opposed to right now, I'm doing a lot of talking and you're doing the questioning.
Yeah.
Effective listening is probably the best tool you can use for being a mentor.
Yeah.
Pick a tool, whatever that is, podcast, a book, something that can stimulate conversation.
Yeah.
But I think it's the discovery by the mentee or by that person through the process, appropriate questions, feedback, stories, that enables them to remember something. So when I teach my leaders, I talk about True North and I talk about Jesse Copeland and Did I Get Lost? So there was a story
Yeah.
specifically attached to that particular principle.
Yeah.
And are you humble enough to ask for help?
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are all really good principles that I've kind of just demonstrated here.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, like, for instance, how does faith tie into all the, what was your faith's journey and how does that tie into everything that you do?
Came to know Christ when I was 16 in high school. I grew up Catholic. I'm named after an Irish priest. And my closest friend in high school came down with spinal meningitis, and I cracked open the Bible.
Got it.
And the Holy Spirit and the Lord came into my heart. My mother actually had a birth defect at 6 days old, and she kind of dedicated me to the Lord if there was going to be healing involved with that. So I think the Lord had me targeted for faith work.
Yeah.
But I always wanted a family, so priesthood was not an option that I wanted to pursue. But then as I met my wife and connected, we blended these different backgrounds and went into non-denominational Christian service and also the journey of that faith. And then served and grew and we were up in Dallas for about 15 years with a
Okay.
very strong church, and then have done the same thing here in Austin.
Very, very good. And now, like Community First, how did you get involved with what you guys are doing with Mission Loaves, Fish and Loaves?
Yeah, Mobile Loaves and Fishes. We planted a church with a family, and we wanted this church to be focused on caring for the poor, the oppressed, the
Yeah.
widow, and the orphan. That was probably about 16 years ago, I think. And we rented a Lutheran church on Sunday nights after they were done with all of their weekend services. And it was right down in South Congress, which is a very busy part of Austin, eclectic part of Austin with a diverse group of individuals. And so part of that mission is we reached out to prisoners and homeless people and the elderly was part of that mission. And that's where I got introduced to Mobile Loaves and
Got
Fishes.
it.
Started to do truck runs.
Okay.
Monthly truck runs with a couple of guys. I think I shared today in our session that I was looking with my operational mind and discipline background
Yeah.
of how could I effectively and efficiently feed as many people as possible.
Got it.
My friend Bren Wilson would be on the curb, and he knew the person's name, the
Yeah.
drug of choice, their story, and I was much more transactional. Rather than relational. So over that time period, started to get to know people on the street, place them into hotels for a period of time. Alan Graham and Mobile Loaves Fishes in the early days started to put them into RV parks like in a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Kind of have a coordination with the owner of the RV park with the vision of building a village. And Alan's history is he was a real estate developer. So you build relationships over that process. And then I was in his house probably about 10 years ago, and it was a discernment evening. Are you gonna come in and join us or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're about 30 people, eclectic group of people. And there was a woman there that night that challenged my belief. And she made the statement, she says, you really should live your life as if it doesn't make sense without the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I pondered that, and I was like, my job, my house, my income, my kids, most of the things of my life made more sense to the world than to my faith. And so Alan, my wife was not with me that night. That's kind of an important distinction in this conversation. Alan comes around and he goes, Larry, you in or you out to come and join us as an intentional neighbor? Alan, I'll give you my time, talents, and treasures, but I'm not going to move out there
Yeah.
with those people.
Hmm.
Gosh, I'm not proud of that. So I went home and went to church the next day, and our pastor talked about caring for the poor and the oppressed, and you don't have to go to Africa. You can go to the east side of Austin and be a missionary.
Yeah.
So, opportunity number one, opportunity number two, to be obedient and faithful to a call. And then I came home after that. My wife has some health issues, and she was not at that church service either. And so I came home and I said, hey, I think we're supposed to go move on that property.
Yeah.
And her response was, well, it's about time.
Yeah.
So she was prayerfully and patiently allowing the Lord to work in my heart rather than push us to a particular service opportunity.
Yeah.
But out of obedience, we bought an RV the next weekend. And it stayed in storage for about 9 months. We rented our house to a pastor that could have never been or afforded in a house like that. And then he has flourished his ministry in our old town with that resource. So there's been so many particular blessings to a delayed obedient response.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, like even in terms of the tiny homes and all that stuff, when people look at it, there's a certain stigma that they had, but you found it different. Crime rate was low and people were just encouraged. Talk to me about that community.
So the community's on about 52 acres right now. We have on 400 plus residents that are chronically homeless. Average age is 57 years
Yeah.
old. Average time on the street is about more than 10 years. Chronically homeless is either due to physical or mental disability. It's not likely they'll ever get off the street.
Okay.
So we don't have 20 or 30 somethings in this environment. It's the least of these.
Yeah.
So we are almost 10 years. I think it's about 8-9 years into this journey
Okay.
with a path towards housing about 2,000 people. That's our vision. With the 2 additional phases, and we've broken ground in construction on phase 3 and phase 4 over the next several years. But we believe, based on our experience of working with homeless population, that the primary cause of homelessness is the catastrophic loss of family. Now, Tommy, I don't want to make assumptions, but most people that I talk to, including my family, there is some element of addiction, alcoholism, or mental health issues. But we have that safety net or commitment to care that our neighbors have lost. So a lot of people think, well, it's the mental health or addiction issue that leads them to homelessness, but it's really that loss of family. So we also believe in this village that housing won't solve homelessness, but community will. And we're a faith-based organization that is openly welcoming everyone to the table, but we want to serve out and love God and love people with our giftedness to care for those that have really fallen on very traumatic and difficult circumstances.
Very, very good. Hey, as we wrap up this interview, one last thing is, for you, a lot of times you look back at when you were a little boy to where you are right now. What is one or two key lessons that the Lord has shown you for those who are listening, whether it's young marketplace leaders, whether it's college students, whether it's different leaders that are listening? What is 1 or 2 words of advice that you give that you've learned from your lesson in life?
So I'll save you 4 years of discipline and difficulties. I'll give you a West Point education in probably 2 phrases. Okay, from a leadership perspective, and this is very consistent with our Lord and Savior. Tommy, come follow me and do as I do. Disciples, come and follow me.
Yeah.
Okay. And I challenge my leaders occasionally when we have a setting is, what would someone learn by following you for 24 hours?
Yeah.
It's convicting. So are we leading by example? Does our walk match our talk? And that's a very strong emphasis from my West Point experience. The other part of it, which I think also shows up, is we're a society of victims. And when you're a new cadet, you have 5 responses, and I'll interchange sir and ma'am in this from a gender perspective, but you can say yes, sir, no, ma'am, may I ask a question, may I make a statement, yes, sir, no excuse. The last one's no excuse. That's the other best lesson. They used to create these opportunities where you would be late for a formation, where you would be in a position where you actually had an excuse.
Yeah.
And they would just hammer in there, so, hey, Tommy, you missed formation today for lunch. Where were we at? Well, you were with, why did you miss formation? Well, I had this, why'd you miss formation? No excuse, sir.
Yeah.
And so there's another book from the Navy SEALs that talks about extreme ownership.
Yeah.
And basically, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the conditions, they're going to take no excuse from accomplishing their mission. So if you can lead by example and don't create excuses to protect your image or your pride or whatever, and just own it, I think those are 2 key elements of my journey that I'd love to have people take ownership of.
Larry, it reminds me of a lesson that I learned when I was building cell towers. And one year, I'm used to overseeing 20 towers for a client, and Sprint wanted 40 towers. And there was weekly deployment calls. And then Sonny was our vice president, walks in one day during my Sprint deployment calls. And he sits down. And it's oh my gosh, the vice president walks in and he sits down. And then the guy at Sprint says to me, Tommy, can you get this done? I said, I will try my best. Sonny says to Sprint, give me 1 minute, let me talk to Tommy. And he says, Tommy, can you get this done? I said, I will try my best. I don't care if you could try your best. Are you going to get it done? Because if you can't get it done right now, I will fire you. I will replace you right now with someone who can get it done. Can you get it done? I'll get it done. And then from that point on, he tells Sprint, we'll get it done. Afterwards, he says to me, always remember this lesson. I hire you to get the job done, not try your best. Get the job done. And he walks out. And that was a lesson that I had to learn as well too. Now on a separately, later on, a year later, he names me as Employee of the Year. And he says, out of everywhere I go in all the regions, there's one guy that everyone says, if he's on a job, I want him on there because he gets the job done. And he says, I don't follow Jesus. But if this is what it means to follow Jesus, then sign me up. And that was what and after that, I had all these people from my office. I had one person who came and says, Tommy, you follow Jesus. What is it? I've had 3 miscarriages. What does it mean to follow Jesus and have hope? I had another one who was my boss who says, Tommy, can you stay after work? My daughter got diagnosed with a heart issue. Can you pray for my daughter? I had another one who says, I go to the bars all the time. How do you find hope? Because I haven't been able to find hope because I did my job well. And that has always been something I've learned all my life as well too.
You modeled the way. You led by example.
Yeah. And I still remember because this guy, Sonny, was always on her case. There was this one Christian girl. And at that point on, you could download music, and she was downloading Christian music and it's just jamming up our server. And he kept sitting there, tell your Christian friend to quit downloading Christian music and get back to work and do some work around here. And that was just something I learned all the time. But always, there's no excuse, but you got to do your best and get the job done.
Get the job done.
Yeah, get the job done.
I love it. No excuses.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this time. Thank you for just the friendship. Thank you for everything you're doing and just even an example that you lead, whether it's our conversations, but what you're doing over at Community First.
My pleasure, Tommy. Thank you for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to engage with Resource Global and connect with young people and be encouraged about the future. It's all over the world. We're fortunate in Austin to be part of that map. And as you go all over the world, grateful that you landed here in Austin.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.